My name is Sarah, mother of Sam, who is 16 months old. When people ask me about my childhood, the first memories that come to mind are my parents' addictions. I remember being afraid when my mom would cook crack cocaine on our stove. Sometimes she would pass out and she would leave the stove on. I worried about her. I worried about our home burning down. My childhood memories aren't the kinds of memories that most little girls have. I don't have memories of sitting around a dinner table with my family. I barely remember eating at all. I don't have memories of my mom making sure I was okay or taking care of me. There were never board games or movie nights, just us children left to fend for ourselves while my parents were using. By the age of 6, I was removed from my parents' care. 3 of my siblings and I went to live with my grandmother. She tried to establish routines and rules for us, but this was difficult and hard to adjust, and it never quite felt right. We didn't even know how to eat or use a fork or spoon. We had never been taught. Yet we knew what drugs and sex were, and we didn't understand that that wasn't normal for most children. My grandmother tried to shelter and take care of us, but that resulted in a lot of fighting, and by junior high, it became too much. My older sister moved out first, and in with a family from our church. The courts granted them a permanent guardianship order. Eventually, I moved in with them too. I wasn't there long when my sister's godparents, or guardians, found my diaries about me cutting myself and wanting to die. They couldn't handle the fact that I was suicidal and no longer wanted me there. My next stop was my auntie in Saskatchewan. Her relationship with my mother was strained, and that was reflected in how she treated me. All during this time, I maintained straight A's in school, but my mental health was suffering. I was depressed, and I developed anorexia. Everything felt like a struggle. I began dating a guy, and he told me he wanted to run away to BC with me. We did it, but we barely lasted a week before we decided to go back home. I asked him to drop me off in Edmonton so I could at least go to my sister's graduation. That was how I arrived at the homeless shelter. I tried to connect with my social worker, but was unable to reach her. I wanted to be productive and apply for jobs, but I could not contact her, and I felt lost. At the shelter, I felt like I fit in. I felt like they actually understood me. I began spending more time with the people I met there, and within 1 week after I walked in that shelter door, I was using crystal meth. By the second time I did it, I was hooked. Something about the drug made me feel so close to people, like I was invincible and everything made sense. During that period of my life, I was getting high every day. Things began to fall apart even more. I was in and out of group homes. My social worker tried to help, but I was deep in my own cycle of drug use and mental health issues. One night, the police showed up at the place where my boyfriend and I were living, a place we could use and sell drugs together. They broke down the door, and my life flashed before my eyes. I realized that if I were to get arrested, no one would be there for me. In that moment, I knew I wanted things to change. My boyfriend was arrested, and by pure luck, I was released. I had a second chance. In the midst of all this turmoil, I found out I was pregnant. Immediately, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to have my child grow up in the environment I grew up in. I quit using drugs cold turkey. It made me so sick that I had to be admitted to the hospital to detox. But my baby was okay, and that was all that mattered to me. Eventually, I reconnected with a social worker that had been so persistent with me in those earlier years. She advocated for me and showed me how much she truly cared. With her help, I secured income from children's services and moved into a place of my own. When I went into labor, the only person I had to call was my social worker. There was no one else. She showed up immediately, without question, and took me to the hospital. That same social worker is here in the audience today, and I cannot thank her enough. This is where my story changes. This is where everything that came before my son becomes worth it. This is where I start to become the person I am today. Once I arrived home with Sam, my son, I knew I had to get moving. I had to do something productive with my life and keep myself away from drugs and negative influences. I reached out to Terra and enrolled at Braemar School. I started with summer school and did really well. I completed all my credits. I decided to enroll for the next semester. Sam was able to get a spot in the Child and Family Support Center on site at Braemar School. The child care workers made an effort every day to build trust with me, to show me how much they care, and to provide Sam with everything he needed. It felt so good to see him learning while I was learning. We were both growing together in a safe and supportive environment, a first for both of us. This is also when I connected with my Terra educational support worker, who helped me understand the difference between healthy and unhealthy relationships. I had never thought about the relationship I had been in as emotionally abusive, but I could now see that it was. My educational support worker helped me build my confidence and change the way I viewed people in my life. I now know how to set those boundaries and make positive connections. During my first semester, I enrolled in the ambassador program at Braemar. There, I was encouraged to share my story, and that changed my life. Everyone wants to be heard and to feel like they matter. The more I talk about my story, the more I realize how far I've come in my transformation. What I have accomplished in the last 2 years takes many people a lifetime. Some never get the chance to accomplish it at all. I am lucky. I feel lucky. I am a mom. I am sober. I have dreams. I have goals. I now understand that the power of addiction is strong, but the power of love is so much stronger. When I graduate from Braemar School, I want to become a social worker. If I can be to one person what my social worker was to me, my life will not have been in vain. I'm already volunteering at the Bissell Center and hope to work at a shelter during the summer. After I obtain my bachelor's of social work, I plan to go straight into the workforce so I can put a down payment on a home for me and Sam. Above all else, I want to create positive memories for my son. I want him to be able to stand in front of a crowd of people when he is my age and not have memories like mine to share. I want him to have the childhood every little boy should have, one filled with memories of sports or playing with friends, of Christmas presents and playgrounds. All the memories every child deserves. I want to be the person who gives all of that to him and so much more, because I know just how much those memories matter.